When I left Nigeria, my desire was to return back to Nigeria to help make Nigeria the giant of Africa. By the time I got to business school at Stanford, I started having a lot of doubts about going right back into consulting, which is what I thought I would do. So I came and I met a bunch of people, and the consistent answer was, don't. I was like, guys, I actually came to visit. I'm like, what's going on? Do I drop everything I'm doing in the US and move back or not? And I said, you know what, if I don't do it now, I'm probably never going to do it. Ultimately, the reason I made the decision to come back was
Oviosu saw a future where sending money in Nigeria could be as easy as sending a text. He built Paga, a platform that changed how millions of Africans move, save, and trust their money.
I started the business because of my own problems. I had my own problems, but the problem was worse for a lot of other people.
What were your problems?
So my problem was that I was also carrying cash everywhere. I couldn't pay with a card. When I tried to use my card, it doesn't work. And then go to one ATM, it didn't work. You know, it was like one thing after the other. And I was like, why can't we do something where your money's electronic? I have a phone signal. I can send you a text message and send you the money and solve the problem that way. Why do I have to have cash?
What's the one thing you had to unlearn from Silicon Valley?
The number one is...
On this episode of the Afropolitan Podcast, we sit with Oviosu to talk about vision, leadership, and what it truly takes to build the future of African finance. Walk us through your thought process when the flutaways, the pay stacks, the old pays, the money points, people were coming into this market and everyone is okay, so what's Paga going to do?
Two things at the very core. One is...
We see the tweets. And every single day, what we see is we love Afropolitan. This podcast is underrated. This is the best podcast ever. But the problem is 82% of you are not subscribers, but I know you guys are watching. So I need you to click the subscribe button so you can join the Afropolitan family. Thank you. Tayo. So when people tune into our podcast, they may be on the road, on their way to work, winding down from a long day. So the first thing I want you to tell our audience is, why did you make the bet on Africa?
Well, first of all, Chika and AJ, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be with you both. I think for me, like making the bet on Africa was something that I went in waves as to my desire around it. You know, when I left Nigeria at, I think I was 16.
Yeah, we have
when
you
I
at
left
16,
when I left Nigeria. My desire was to return back to Nigeria to help make Nigeria the giant of Africa, you know, and like that was what I grew up.
Yeah.
And then 4 years in the US, by the end of college, I was like, I'm staying here. You know, like this is great. Like, let me just have my life here. So I lost a bit of that. And then you fast forward many years later to business. By the time I got to business school at Stanford, I started having a lot of doubts about going right back into consulting, which is what I thought I would do. And started having a lot of conversations with different people. And I said, what did I really love about consulting? And it was bringing ideas to life and being a trusted advisor to people. And I basically then, you know, was like, okay, maybe I should go back to Nigeria and help and do these two things in Nigeria. So I came and I met a bunch of people, Mezuo, Noeli, you know, and a few other people. And the consistent answer was, don't. I was like, guys, I actually came to visit. I'm like, what's going on? Like, and these guys had all returned. Dan Leddy had returned. All these guys had returned, you know, and these are people who I knew before they went to business school. And I'm like, but the people who left just before me, who are just before me in business school, Nigerians who I was following, I saying don't come, and they're the ones on the ground. I was like, what's going on? So I didn't go. Then you move forward about 3 years later, and I was doing a project for Cisco in South Africa, and I was talking with Fred Swanica, Chinese Chijoke, Achaleke, and these guys who are all in South Africa, but working across the continent. And they started saying things have changed dramatically in Nigeria. And you need to think about now, you know, going back. And at the time, I was actually thinking of going to set up a company in the US. So it was a very big decision I had to make about, do I drop everything I'm doing in the US and move back or not? And I remember being in Bhutan, meditating and, this beautiful landscape. and I'd gone by myself on a hike and on a trek, I should say. And I said, if I don't do it now, I'm probably never going to do it. So I'm going to look at it very seriously. And then I started the process of talking to people, etc. And ultimately, and I can tell you the story of like how the actual decision, but like ultimately the reason I made the decision to come back was that I really believe in the potential of Africa and of Nigeria specifically to be a powerhouse in the world, a global player. We have such amazing talent across a variety of sectors. And I think if we get our act half as right as we probably could, I think we'll be a major player and factor in the world, right? And it will bring economic development to society. So for me, it was like, I want to be part of that. I want to play some role in seeing this happen. And that was what really, really changed it for me. But it was a very tough decision to make the move because I was very happy with my life. I was doing very well. I was on a good trajectory, etc. So and of all my siblings, I was the last that anyone would think would come back to Nigeria. Yeah.
Actually, I want to double click into something because a lot of people who watch our podcast are currently in MBAs, right? So they're going through that process. So what advice would you give to them? Do you think we're in 2025? Is now a good time to move back for those who are getting their MBA program?
It's interesting. I think I'm of two minds. I think that there is a huge opportunity to be engaged. I don't know that you move back right away. And where I'm sort of thinking that we are now again is that about how can we leverage our human capital to serve the world is one key thing, because I think that's the biggest advantage that we have. I've actually been thinking, I would love to even get what you guys think about this, because like when I think of everything going on with AI, right, I think we're not, I don't think we're at a place where we're the ones going to create the technology. Yeah. Could we leverage the technology, and could we leverage our human capital to leverage that technology and advance things locally? So one thing I wonder for people who are already abroad is, could you be engaged with the continent, do well over where you are, and then leverage that, that connection, that capability to bring the needed foreign investments, et cetera, that we need on the continent, right? So it's not a slam dunk in my mind that you should come or not come, right? I think you have to balance it up.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting thing because we've spoken to a few investors and they've all said the same thing. Look, the LLM models have been built. Like, we're not going to recreate something new, OpenAI, billions of dollars. Like, you just can't compete with that war chest, right? But can we build applications on top of that? I think that's very possible. And I also feel we still have not tapped into that diaspora funding. And I think we're going to talk about that later. So I definitely agree with you as well.
Yeah.
Tayo, so you're a triple OG in this business. So I've been looking forward to this conversation, right? I think when I think about Paga, I think about a company that I would consider anti-fragile, right? Like, you have weathered all seasons. Like, you were, like you said, from the 2010s, you've been in the 2020s, you've survived COVID, and you've seen all comers come, right? You've seen when it was hard fundraising environment. You've seen when the ZERP era. You've seen a lot, right? So I think when you think about Paga now, 23 million customers, you've processed about $8.7 trillion worth of transactions. Walk us through your thought process when the flutaways, the pay stacks, the old pays, the money points, people were coming into this market and everyone is, okay, so what's Paga going to do, right? So how did you not only persist, but even thrive? Because now Paga is like a behemoth, right? So what was that process of first galvanizing the team? Like, guys, don't be shocked by all these fundraising numbers. We're here, we're going to attack this mountain. Like, walk us through that whole process and your thought process as a leader.
Yeah, I mean, wow, there's a lot there. I think two things at the very core. One is I've been very fortunate from the very beginning to have a great team of people around me. From Jay to Eric, our CTO, to entire leadership team. And these are, and our investors as well. And these are all people who really caught on to the long game we're playing and the vision that we have, right? And that has helped us and helped me also stay steady, right? Is that we know the strategy, we know what we're trying to do, and we're refined, but the vision is very clear, the purpose is very clear. And so from day one, this is a purpose-built business, right? And all of us find that purpose in different ways, but I look at it that there's actually a God-given mission here, right, of what we're trying to accomplish. And for me, at the core of it, personally, is like, I want payments and financial services to be an afterthought for all Africans. And it's not yet. We're making progress, but it's not yet. And so I think that steadiness of the purpose has helped us in moments where like, oh, what's happening? This person did this person did that. Okay, we have to watch what competition is doing and pay attention to the market shifts, but we need to stay steady to who and true to who we are and how we're operating. And I remember in 2014, we had a very clear, candid conversation with one of our investors, and then which led to, a strategy session with all our investors about how, look, we could not build a Silicon Valley type business here, just growth without thinking about sustainability. And so in 2014, we made the decision that we're going to get this business profitable and grow sustainably, and we're not going to do it by slashing and burning. And I think at the time we had maybe like 300 staff or something like or 200 staff, and we're not going to slash and burn, but we're going to make it very sustainable. So I think that's the first thing. That's just steadiness of that focus. And then I think the second is really listening to the customers and paying attention to like what they are asking for. 3 years ago, we made the first big pivot in Paga. And that pivot came from me just having conversations with other entrepreneurs about their business. I remember having similar conversations with you guys, what you're thinking of doing, and I realized that for quite a few of them, the things that they were trying to solve in payments and financial services were things that we had done for ourselves. And it hit me that, oh my God, Flutterwave can't do that for you, because if they're going to they're going to have to partner with this bank or that bank. Paystack can't do that for you. They're going to have to do this, do that. But we can. We do this for ourselves. And that led to what's now called Paga Engine, which is we opened up our entire infrastructure to other companies to build on top of. And so today that now is the third part of our business. And every service we have in that business was co-created with a ready-made client. Not even made and then we're shopping for someone to sell it to, is that we actually had someone who was ready to take it, who sat with us to design it, to say this works, that doesn't work, and like, let's do it. Until today, that's still the model. We just launched a couple new services this year that was co-created by existing clients, and then we'll open up to other people. And that's been fascinating to see that grow. So I think that's been the second thing. It's one, the team and the steadiness on strategy on what we're doing. I guess I shouldn't underplay the investors who believe in that strategy and who have stepped up to the plate, right? Because we've had our tough moments trying to raise capital. And I mean, I can tell war stories of like trying to raise capital and it not happening, but our investors continuing to step up. And so even though we don't publicly announce how much we've raised, it's interesting. Someone was asking me the other day, like, oh, you haven't announced a raise since X amount of time. I'm like, guy, I've raised more since my last announcement than I ever did when I announced, right? But we just don't say why. What's the point? Just be quiet, do your work. We've got the business profitable. We're still growing venture scale. And I can point to the clear differentiators of how we're different from a Paystack, how we're different from a Flutterwave, how we're different from MoneyPoint or OPay. We're just a very different strategy. But it also shows you the vibrance and the big opportunity of payments and financial services. I always say to people, like, it's not like any other African country. It's like India or the US, right? When PayPal started, nobody thought Braintree had an opportunity. Braintree then came out, and then Stripe came, and nobody thought Stripe could compete with Braintree, right? And then Square, nobody thought Square, and it's actually interesting. Square is actually a really, really interesting one, because when I remember maybe just 2 years ago, I was in Silicon Valley talking to one of my best friends, and And I was telling him about, and I brought up Cash App. He did not know Cash App. He knew Square, but not Cash App. But he knew PayPal and he knew Venmo, right? And I was like, you know, and he's white American, right? And I was like, this is interesting because their market is not white American Silicon Valley, even though they're in Silicon Valley for Cash App, right? But I was like, and I told him, I was like, if I asked somebody in your level of society in Atlanta, Black American, they know Cash App. Like, you know, it's just a very different target audience, but it just tells you how big the opportunity is for Cash App even, right? That they've not even touched you at all. They're not even in their radar. And it's a similar thing in Nigeria where there's so much to attack when it comes to payments and financial services. And if you think broadly across the continent as well, and that's been huge for us. So it's been about us figuring out what our lane is, where we are playing and how we do it, and then just focusing on the customers.
We need to explore some of the war stories, so please you're definitely going to share some with us. But I think hopefully this can tease it out a little bit. But when you're fundraising, and you're, like I said, you've seen all seasons, right? Like first, could you walk us through what your own fundraising process was like, and especially around that fundraising time? I think at the time, Paga was literally one of the most well-capitalized fintech companies out the gate, right? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was about 10 million at the time that was reported.
Yeah, we've raised at different times. So our seed round we raised about 700, and then we did a Series A, which was around 10-ish, I think, and then a Series B that was about 25 total, I think, something like that.
Yeah. So, but you were early, is what I'm saying. This isn't. This is pre 2016.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're now seeing the flutaways, the chipper cashes, the OPays, and they're talking about 200, 300, 400 million dollar raises, you also know maybe the indiscipline that can breed in a company when you're overraised, right? But what did that look like to investors? Because I know this happens, especially in Silicon Valley, who are like, wait, so Tayo, what about all these other companies? What are they raising for? What is the opportunity, and how come you guys are not like in these conversations? What was that conversation with investors to explain to them, like, this is our strategy, this is what we're about? I'm sure some of them maybe didn't believe you, but now with hindsight, right? I think you've been proven correct in so many ways. Yeah. So just to boil it down, first question is, how was your fundraising process, right? Second is, when you then went to fundraise again throughout this period of like ZERP era, what were those conversations like between you and investors?
So early days, I think if I actually go back to the very beginning, because there's some lessons there, right? I was, and some of the things I tell people today is, I was very hesitant to pass the hat around my friends because I didn't want to have funding impact friendships. That was a mistake, because later on, if I fast forward a little bit, quite a few of my friends were upset at me that I didn't bring them in at the seed round, and they came in at the A round. And so they, of course, thought they're going to better return. I was like, we believe in you, we would have done this. But by the time we even knew that you were raising, you'd already closed the thing. So one big takeaway from me now is actually make money with your friends, like, bring your friends in early on. And so that was one. The second, on that journey, is, and I think what really, at the very beginning, my first check was my former boss. Our third check was my former boss. That second boss, who came in third, brought to us our largest investor in the seed round. Gave him, when I mentioned I'd spoken to him, he wrote an email that I just thought, like, literally sealed the deal, like, because, like, we're friends, and it's actually interesting as well in that story, because I don't think he thought, this boss's name is Hilton. I don't think Hilton thought that Tim Draper would be interested in a business in Nigeria. So he'd already invested, but he didn't think, let me introduce you to Tim Draper. However, me just catching up with a friend who used to work for Tim was like, wait a second, I think Tim would love this idea. Can I introduce him? It wasn't even me asking. I didn't even know. I didn't even think about that either. And then when I mentioned it to Hilton, I was like, Tim's my guy. I'm going to email him. And just like one email, then he'll, and I think that really helped. Of course, he still did his diligence. And actually, interestingly, the person who did the diligence for him is Mark Straub of Smile ID, right? Like, so Mark was the first person to do diligence on Paga for any investor. And I don't know if that was the first time Mark looked at anything in Africa. I'm not sure, but certainly that's how I met Mark actually. So it's actually really cool for me personally today. And when we work with Smile, like they're, we're committed to this partnership because he was there from pretty much the early days. But I think the story there on the two bosses is that just do great work wherever you are, right? Because if I didn't do great work for Hilton, he wouldn't have invested, right? Like he didn't have any reason, So I think that's a key lesson point on this. And then, but fast forwarding in terms of the funding cycles, et cetera, right? I think there's always at different points noise about someone else doing something, et cetera. I've come to a very clear view that one, investors don't owe you anything, right? Nobody owes you anything to invest in your business. And secondly, you don't know anybody else's story, their own strategy, et cetera, right? One of the companies you mentioned came very strongly into Nigeria, invested $150 million, very loudly, and very loudly also shut down all of those things and then course corrected. And actually, they've done a good job in that course correction. So you give them credit for that. But then that was $150 million just like blown, right? And I'm sitting there like, what? Are you serious? That's crazy, So I'm like, okay, that's not our brute force strategy. I don't know where they got the money. I don't know, So that's different. And I appreciated something. The other thing you can do is, you don't know the backstory of everything, right? So you give an example. There's another company that is well known that raised the largest Series A in Africa ever, right? And brought in my big Silicon Valley investor. So publicly, that's like, wow, that's crazy, right? Like that's a huge deal. And I forget the name of this guy who was referencing something similar this week. I'm so sorry, I'm forgetting his name, but I think he's based in Kenya. But he was talking about the company that just raised, the e-mobility company that just raised, and how
their backstory.
Yeah, it was telling the backstory
from
right?
India and all
from
that
India
stuff.
And yeah. So this other
Stroby or something.
Stroby, yeah. So this other fintech that has raised like the largest Series A till date, still the largest Series A of any company in Nigeria. The backstory is the founders invested almost half of that money. So it's a big difference if you're bringing $60 million like to say Sequoia bring the rest, right? Like it's a very different story, right? So I say that just not to knock them. Great, if I had $100 million of my own money, I would have put it in, right? But maybe I'd have been less disciplined, actually, right? So who knows, right? I mean, that's the other part of it, right? So I think, but what that for me, the reason I say these things is that I don't know anybody else's story. I just know my story. I just know what I'm doing, where I am, how I'm looking at it, and what the opportunity is. And the differentiator of our strategy to what people are doing. And make no mistake, we want to win. Like we're out to win, right? So we may look like the nice guy on the outside, but we're out to win. So on our strategy, in our playing field, we're out to win. So I think differentiating to investors always like the playing field that you're on and why Coke is not the same as Pepsi. What's different? How does that sustain, et cetera? I think that's the challenging story that you have to keep having, because on the surface, everybody thinks everything's just the same, right? So you have to help people understand the differentiators between them.
Etcha, remember that time I walked into a bank, I'm not going to give the name, and I asked them for $1,000 and they told me no, they cannot withdraw any dollar for me. And I was so upset. And I just remember asking everybody, how can I solve this issue? And I'm so happy that I finally have VBAN to finally solve this issue for me.
The thing is, you should be able to have access to your money anywhere in the world when you get paid, right? So I'm grateful we have VBAN as a sponsor for the Afropolitan Podcast. With VBAN, you're able to get paid in foreign currencies, whether it's pounds, USD, euros, and you can actually spend it in local currency as well. Now, you're also able to get a virtual card, which you can use to spend in and pay for services across the world, right? So I'm grateful to have VBAN as a sponsor.
You can download it on the Apple or Google Play Store. And remember, when you sign up, you use Afropolitan so they know you came from this podcast.
Now, I'll tell you, I've been knowing you for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about you were coming to the Stanford Africa Business Forums as long as like 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
I remember at the time, I'd obviously not been spending as much time in Nigeria, but I would always say to myself, like, man, Tayo is in like the Silicon Valley circles. He did Stanford. He has a Stanford alumni. How does a founder who could have slotted right into any Silicon Valley like opportunity go from like, I could be over here in the diaspora to, is it Dumota markets? I want to go and bank somebody, right?
Yeah.
Because I would always wonder, like, what's that culture shift for?
Yeah.
Because to be fair, presenting wise, it's like, you don't think Tayo is going to be in Balogun markets every other day, but that's where Paga, those are the streets that Paga plays into
100%.
bank people in.
Yeah.
So what stories do you have for diaspora founders who are thinking about coming back where it's like, it's not a pitch deck, it's not going to be over Zoom.
Yeah.
You're going to have to enter streets.
Yes.
Talk to actual people.
100%.
What stories where, when you first had your culture shocks where you're like, oh, this is for real.
Yeah.
Like, we are really going to be out here banking the unbanked. What stories do you have for us?
Yeah, no, look, I think for anyone looking to come back to kind of do any business, you have to go understand your customers and really go in. I mean, I spent a lot of time getting my own feel for the market. And going into the field literally by myself. I got in bus, it wasn't that driver was taking me around. I got in a bus and I went around, and I from one place to the other to understand things personally and to talk to people myself to really get it and just observe. I remember one story that really hit me. I remember, Lola Talabioni. I asked her at the time, I was like, I'm trying to figure out the people who sell in traffic. Where do they buy this gum from that they're selling?
Yeah.
And she's like, why? And I'm like, I want to know who's selling this gum to them. I want to go and understand it. And literally, she threw a couple different, she connected with one person to another person. Eventually, I found this guy and I went to his stall in around that Maryland area. He's in some inner corner. And everybody in the whole Maryland strip, when you arrive there in the traffic, and back then it was a lot, they're all buying from this guy. Very small space. And in a matter of like the first 15 minutes, this guy over 5 M in cash of transactions. And he just had a bag of money just sitting. Cash. So I'm like, how do you, get this back to the bank? I was like, I have my security, people who like know me around here. We go together different. We break it up, and I have numerous stories like that of just like, wow, this small store, you would not think that much money is moving out of this little place. But I think that really helped me understand that, even though I started the business because of my own problems. I had my own problems, but the problem was worse for a lot of other people.
What were your problems?
So my problem was that I was also carrying cash everywhere, right? I couldn't pay with a card. I was banked with 2 banks. And at the time, we'll have somebody come into the office every Friday, say, please, let me go to the bank to cash check for you. So you write a check to them, sign it to their name, and you better write your signature properly. Otherwise, that's another wahala.
There's a story about that.
My signature is what they say is irregular. I know it's irregular. It goes, I can sign that signature 20 times and it looks a bit different, And so, they'll go and cash money for you. And then when I try to use my card, it doesn't work. And then go to one ATM, it didn't work. It was like one thing after the other. And I was like, but I have a cell signal. And I had used PayPal on SMS in the US, even though that service, at some point I was talking to the folks at PayPal and this head of product at the time at PayPal was like, oh my God, you're one of the few that used that. Like we had to kill that product. Nobody used it. Like I was like, yeah, PayPal was available on SMS. And I'm like, that was the mental model I had, right? So if the PayPal is on SMS, why can't we do something where your money's electronic? I have a phone signal. I can send you a text message, right? And send you the money and solve the problem that way. Why do I have to have cash, right? And at the time I thought like for any country to be successful, you have to make payments work. You have to make financial services work. Again, it has to be an afterthought, So those were my problems, right? Trying to figure out. But for most people, it was even that they weren't even banked in the first place, right? And then how do you get banking services to them? And so that's what got us going down that path. Actually, the regulations at the time pushed us more into the agent business than we thought we would do. Because the regulations at the time, I remember there was no BVN, there was no NIN, there was no way to digitally KYC you. And interestingly, the AML laws of Nigeria, anti-money laundering laws of Nigeria, which is what in any country actually controls the know your customer rules, has not changed in the last 16, 17 years. Like, maybe there's been one amendment, but there's not been any major change. So what we're in today is what we always had, but we had no way to digitally achieve it, right? And that's why in 2014, we made a big strategic decision that we would not invest another dollar in marketing to consumers until you could digitally KYC people, until we had access to USSD on all the mobile operators, and until the CBN changed the limits on transactions. And all of that came through in 2020, right? Just at the beginning of 2020. So, so that's when, so it took 6 years to get those three things to change. And that was constant lobbying, but at the same time, we could do the agent business. So we continued building and continued scaling out the agent.
Could you break down for our viewers what the agent business is? Like you can imagine somebody who's never even understood what this looks like. You can be watching from the US, the UK. A lot of people in Africa understand what the agency business model looks like. But can you break it down? Like what does that look like in practicality?
Yeah. So as we were thinking about how do we bring financial services to the mass market, and people who were not yet digitally savvy. Again, at the time, very little, no smartphones pretty much, right? Very few, not a lot of data access. The epiphany that I had was, oh my God, on every street corner, Baba is on every corner. And in fact, they all call him Baba. And Baba sells you, someone who sells you provisions. So they sell bread, they sell milk, sugar, etc., and biscuits, all that kind of stuff on every corner. If you ask my 6-year-old son now, who's Baba, he knows exactly where Baba is. I can go there. And best of all, on almost all of them do this. You could buy on credit from them because they know everybody in their community. And then you come back and you pay them later. So the epiphany was like, oh, why don't we offer services through that guy for that community? So rather than you go to stay in traffic for an hour, get to a banking hall, deposit money, go back in traffic again, just go to Baba and Baba will do it for you. Rather than you do all of that to pay your electricity, your cable, Baba will do it for you. And then we only train Baba. So that became an agent, so to speak. Now, one of the other epiphanies that we had, and we were the first to do this globally, was having the agent perform transactions on your behalf. What was common in Kenya and other other parts of Southeast Asia was the agent putting money into your own account that you then use to pay your electricity and do all that stuff. So we created this model where the person actually does a transaction for you. And that's how we got Paga going, truly, right? Because if we could not do that, then our ideas would have just fallen because, we couldn't do the consumer direct business, which is like PayPal, Venmo at the time for the reasons I mentioned. And so we started out that agent business, and that's how we got into the mass market. And build the brand and build people's trust in this brand. And I think that really helped us also save the amount of money people are spending today. So the reason why we've not needed to spend as much as others have on developing their brand is because we built the brand through the community. And it's already like ground up. People know Paga, right? And so people grew up with Paga, right? Today I run into people who are like, yeah, like when I was growing up, Paga was in my neighborhood everywhere. So it's still there. And of course we add to it with marketing we do, but it's reduced our marketing spend, right?
Because trust compounds.
The trust has compounded over time, right?
Yeah, and actually, what I would love to hear is a story of how you changed someone's life and how it changed you.
Yeah. Man, one that comes to mind right away, I remember being on this Twitter space. It wasn't even me hosting, somebody else was hosting and I was listening, but I got on stage to ask a question or something. And then this lady comes on stage while I'm on stage and she says, "Are you Oviosu of Paga?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "I just want to say thank you because I went through medical school on Paga." I was like, "What?" She was like, "Yeah, like I became a Paga agent and that's how I paid for medical school." and I've now graduated. I'm a doctor. And I just saw you on stage, and I said, I want to come on here and say thank you. And I was just bawling. Like, I was just like, wow, And so just hearing stories like that, people talking of like the impact on their parents and stuff like that, really for all of us as a team and the journey we've actually been on as a company, we looked at that the early days of Paga and up till maybe, I say act one of our journey is the way I talk about it internally, was about making life possible. Like that was the ethos, right, of what drove us, right? So it's not about the payments, it's about what are you trying to achieve behind it, right? And that's something that drove us, right? And so hearing people's stories, and what the jobs that have been created, we estimate, almost 200,000 jobs created through this platform, and both direct and mostly indirect jobs. And then the impact just on people's lives has been really, really immense. And that's something that really motivates us. And now as we go into act two of our journey, we don't want people to just have life be possible. We want them to thrive, right? Like we want you to be able to live boldly wherever you want to, wherever
and
you want to.
what does that look like for people to be thriving now?
Yeah. So for us, it's like, like for Africans, we want you to be able to live boldly wherever. Right, so the world is interconnected. This is actually a topic that we've discussed many times. Like,
yes.
The world interconnected, and me sitting here in Lagos today, I was chatting. My first meeting this morning was with someone in Bangkok, right? And I want to be able to trade with that person in Bangkok, right? I want to be able to arrive in Bangkok and be able to do whatever I want to do. Again, payments, financial has been an afterthought to it. And so for us, what that means is that we want to be able to offer the services that enables Africans to be global, right? To be local and global, right? So you're here in Nigeria, you can engage your financial world as you want it. But if you're also engaging with the rest of the world, you can do that financially. When you show up anywhere in the world, you're okay, right? So the way we think about it practically is that we have an infrastructure that is going to serve both domestic payments and financial services, but give access to global financial rails and access to global commerce. And so we're on executing a strategy towards that goal. And it's a long game. We've done Nigeria, and then recently we made an announcement to launch in the US, which is the first step towards access to global financial rails. And then we're going to build on that.
Can you speak more about that? What was the opportunity you saw in expanding into the US, and what benefits can like customers in the US hope to then get by being connected into Paga?
Yeah. So the long goal is to make global banking available to all Africans, whether you're in the diaspora or you're living on the continent.
And can you break down what does global banking mean?
So global banking for us is access to, checking, savings, credit in multi-currencies, right? Whether you're an individual or you're a business, and the ability to trade. Now, that's what global banking means. For us, we want to put that into our infrastructure so that any of the companies across Africa building on our infrastructure can access those capabilities for their customer base, for whatever their audience is, right? Because we don't for a second think we're going to capture all of the market. For a second, it's not even in my head, right? We have our own two direct use cases on the same infrastructure, which is our consumer app and our business merchant app that we also take to market. But it's really about putting all this into the infrastructure for people. Now, the first showing of that is this US launch, where we've launched digital banking, US digital banking on soil in US, FDIC insured accounts in your name. It's not a wallet, it's a proper account in your name for people of the African diaspora in the US as a target audience. Now, of course, anybody in the US can open the account. Actually, anyone with a US residential address can open the account. So the way we think about this initial launch is that, it's targeting three sets of people, right? One are Nigerians in the US who still engage with Nigeria. Two are folks like us who are in Nigeria but have a leg in the US as well, right? And we live in both worlds. And then those who are Japan. So Japa with Paga, right? So
Japa with Paga. Is that a tag?
Yeah.
Oh,
hashtag Japa with Paga, right? Like, because I know. Seriously, right? Like, yeah, Japa with Paga.
That is actually cute.
I've been waiting to use that tag. When we finally launched, I was like, yes, finally it's here.
I can see big billboards out and it's like a jump.
Yeah.
Japa with Paga, yeah.
Actually, we'll change. We'll change our billboard to that. But like when I got to the US, I remember it was very hard to open a bank account initially.
Yeah.
I think I ended up having to open a credit union somewhere. And then eventually when I got to USC 2 years later, then Bank of America allowed me to open an account because I'd been in the US for 2 years. And now I still have that account, right? Like until now the Paga launched, now I'm reducing my usage of the Bank of America, right? But I used that account since then, right? So they actually locked me in some ways. But even with that, they till today, now they offer me credit, but for the longest time they couldn't offer me credit. And my first credit card in the US was MBNA, and it was a secure card. So I had to put $1,000 down just to get $1,000 credit. This is my own money, just to build credit. And I think the next was like 5,000 or 10,000, and then then eventually I got a proper credit card. And so those challenges are actually still there. It's actually been really interesting seeing the people who've opened this account so far, right? But basically those challenges are still there, and we want to try and solve that, right? And so that's the first thing around what we've launched now. So what it does is really about people living in two worlds and using one wallet. So in one wallet, I can get proper Nigeria banking. I can get full US banking. And for those who are in the US, what it does for them is, it's on my Apple Pay, right? So anywhere I go, I can use it. I get a physical card with it as well. And then when you want to send to Nigeria, it's very easy to send. You just enter the bank account number and send the money, right? And vice versa, right? You can also receive from Nigeria. So it enables you to really live in both worlds and transact easily. And so for those coming for Debt to December especially, open a Paga US account, open it, fund it. You find it super easy when you're here.
What does it look like? And for founders who are watching and they want to get inspiration, right? Paga probably first started off as a B2C company, which is like your direct to consumer.
Yeah.
And you now have to develop the muscle to appeal to enterprise, right?
Yeah.
I remember I was paying for my flight to Qatar.
Yeah.
And Paga was the one powering it. And I'm just like, wow.
Yeah.
So you are doing B2C and you're doing B2B.
Yeah.
What did it feel like developing that muscle from the team? Because the team that's going to build a B2C product is not necessarily the same type of team that can build a B2B product
100%.
enterprise. Different disciplines, right? So
100%.
Walk us through how you're able to build that sort of team and what does that look like in terms of managing customer relations between both sides?
It's hard. It's very hard. And even for me personally, but what we had to, and again, our background and where we're coming from as a team was B2C. Like even for me personally, like that's where but literally again, we had to go back to first principles. Like I spent quite a bit of time with, and not just me alone, some other members of the team who are focused on the B2B, with others who've done this, who've built and scaled B2B businesses. Fortunately, one of our board members, that's why he cut his teeth, right? And so we spent a lot of time with him as well. How do we build our sales model? How do we execute? What do we do, right? And really just going back to learn, right? Truly. And so you have to be open to do that. Now, at my level, I cut across everything. So, one moment I'm in a meeting just around B2B stuff. In the next moment, I'm being engaged on a consumer conversation. But the team themselves, and so for some of us in the company, we do that. We have to do that. But we have different teams. So the B2B team, very much focused on that. And one of the things we actually say very much to our clients on the B2B side, and it's actually how we operate, is that team wears blinders to anything else that's happening, right? We don't care if you compete. The competitors of ours are using our B2B infrastructure. And that's fine. Like we will give you the best service. We're never, because the day we do anything to hurt that business dies, right? So we will never. So it's like super clear, right? It's like AWS. I always use AWS and Netflix. Netflix is on AWS. Netflix's biggest competitor is Prime Video, right? The AWS team do not care what Prime Video wants to do. You don't care. We're going to take care of Netflix, right? Like that's what we do, right? Like, and that's exactly the same thing, right? So, but building that muscle is tough. So what I encourage people to do is and actually I'm glad we didn't do it too early in our journey because I think it's very difficult. I think we had the luxury of being in a place where we had scaled one side of the business already, and then we're thinking of building up this other side of the business. And so that gave us the ability to have a separate team to focus on it, right? And still be entrepreneurial, right? Because then that's why the definition of entrepreneurship I love is by a guy from a professor of business, Stanford Business School, from a professor of mine, Irv Grousbeck. And it says, and talking about B2B, B2C, he started what's now AT&T Cable. But he says entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity without regard of the resources currently controlled, right? And I like it because it can be either a completely new opportunity or within a business opportunity, right? Because that team that set up Paga engine, but like this is all you got. you can't take more than this engineer, that's all you got, right? And you got to go. So they're also very entrepreneurial in how they went about setting up that business. So I think the big learning for me is about being willing to open your mind to learn, to go and ask the people who've done it, right? Have multiple conversations, take the best practices, and just always refine, right, as you go.
And actually, I want to say that, interestingly enough, one of my most controversial posts, but also most shared on LinkedIn, was me talking about this tension between being in Silicon Valley, spending time there, but then having to come back to Nigeria and pretty much reframe my modeling around how I build business in Nigeria.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, what's the one thing you had to unlearn from Silicon Valley?
Yeah, the number one is growth, right? And pouring money into just growth, right? You could spend a lot of marketing dollars here and get nowhere, right? Because marketing is expensive. There's a lot of noise, especially in consumer. There's a lot of noise. And we've seen it in the tech ecosystem, right? If we look at Big Brother this year versus Big Brother 6-7 years ago, even. A bunch of tech companies were doing Big Brother.
Yeah.
Right? They're not doing that today.
Because they finally realized it's not their target audience.
It's beyond, target audience, but also like, you can build a brand for something like, So it's, how do you spend in a wiser way, right? And some of those things are behind the scenes, right, of what you do. So, for example, one of the investments we made many years ago was to invest in our applications in a way that the marketing team knows exactly who they're spending on, and a funny example of this came, I was in one of my WhatsApp groups with my friends, and and I was complaining about how at the time I wouldn't subscribe to the New York Times. And my friend was like, why? And I said, why would I subscribe to this thing and then they'll still be serving me ads? Like, it's just like really annoying. And then she sent a screenshot, and it was a screenshot of a Paga ad in the New York Times, app. And it was like, pay your DSTV, right? She's like, but you're the one serving the ad. And I'm like, oh. But I was like, and she uses Paga. And so I was like, but you've never paid DSTV on Paga, right? She's like, no, I haven't. I'm like, that ad is very specific. We didn't just send it to anybody. It's like, you already use Paga and you have not paid DSTV. That's why you're seeing this. So like the spend is so specific, right? Like, and so we know who we're targeting. And so, but to do that well meant we actually invested quite a lot into the platform for the team to be able to get that kind of insight. So it's not your name specifically, but we know the kind of cohorts that we're going after.
But actually, I want to go deeper into that as well, because you talked about a bit about growing sustainability, right?
Yeah.
Like growing at the pace that makes sense for the business.
Yeah.
So some of the conversations I've been having with investors is that we need patient capital. That is an ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
How do you explain that to investors who, some of them are from Silicon Valley and are saying, but that doesn't fit my investment thesis?
Correct. It's very tough. And actually, my top view on Africa and where we are in terms of investments today is that the Silicon Valley model is not working for Africa, and it's not the right model. And so what I mean by the Silicon Valley model, it's I raise a fund for 10 years and I earn 220 on it, right? So 2% a year, 20% carry. I think it's the wrong model for Africa, actually. I think the right model is a holding company model. And if we look at the most successful entrepreneurs in Nigeria today, Aliko Dangote, Femi Otedola, Rabiu, like these are all Tony Elumelu. These are all individuals that have taken a holding company model. Not that they haven't raised money from externally, but they've now taken a holding company model. And a lot of their fundraise has either been the debt markets or the public equity markets, right? And we're seeing that also like with VFD now. VFD has gone public. I think Flutterwave will follow their step in Nigeria. I think it's a smart move, right? Because I think the local investors, because ultimately what you want more local money. Yeah. Investing in local opportunities because they get the long term, they get the issues, right? They understand that Dangote refinery has to work, for everything else to work, right? And so, but someone in Silicon Valley won't quite get that, and to be fair to them in Silicon Valley, they have a wider range of what they're also looking at. So that said, doesn't mean that there's no opportunity for them to invest. They just have to take a different mindset to it, right? And say, because, they will be outsized return ultimately, just not in their timeframes that they are thinking about, right? I think that's the issue. And I think it's going to be first helping the pension funds in the US and the West to understand it, because they actually are the investors in this,
they're the
venture
LPs,
fund, the LPs, and they're already long-term thinking. So they're actually the ones that need to step in to that plate and actually take the role that the DFIs have been playing, because the DFIs are not risk takers. They're been great, and they are great, and there's some of them that I love working with, some I don't love, but they, but by nature they're not risk takers.
But actually, then, what does it look like if I'm a startup founder today, right? And I'm building something and has huge potential. Where should I go get money? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So, I think you have to think about two things. One, friends, family, as best as you can to get something going. But how do I quickly get to a place where I'm generating revenues to drive this business, right? And being able to show traction. And we're fortunate that now there's actually more seed investors, there's more Series A investors. And so, but I would still, even with that, I would still think about raising just enough and not trying to over-raise. and particularly what valuations. The higher your valuation early, the greater stress you're giving on your business. Because you think about it this way, if I'm a seed investor, I'm looking to make 5x of my money, something like that. If I invested at a 8 million valuation, then for me to make 5x, I just have to reasonably believe you can get to 40 million. But if you raised at 40 million, then I have to reasonably believe you can get to 200 million to get my 5x, right? So it's better you can raise the same amount of money. So even though it hits your percentage ownership, because you, the entrepreneur, are playing a longer game, I think it's better to raise at the lower valuation early, right? And get a higher valuation later on.
So what did it feel like for you when you were seeing startups coming out the gate, like 10, 50, $100 million valuations at seed round, especially during that 2020, 2021, 2022?
Yeah.
And, they're celebrating it. Like, what did it feel like for you? And what advice would you have had for those founders that hopefully they would have taken?
Yeah. I mean, at the time, we would just look at ourselves like, what is going on? What's happening here, right? And it wasn't just in Nigeria. We're seeing it in different parts of the world where this was happening. But the reality actually is that a lot of those businesses don't exist today. Right. And some of the challenges have been these challenges, right? Or, seeing people raise $20, $30 million and 2 years later, I'm like, how, so I think financial discipline is really key. I'm figuring out that discipline, but I think if you're playing the long game, then you get there, right? I remember when I met Steve Case, who was the founder of AOL in Kenya. And over a period of a week, we interacted a few times in Kenya, and then he came to Nigeria, and then we interacted in Nigeria. And then I think that end of that week, there was an art show I went to. And then I bumped into him again at the art show as I was walking around. And we said hi, talked briefly, and then we parted. And then he turned around and came to me and he tapped me and he's like, Tayo, this is very early days of Paga. He's like, it's going to take you over 10 years to get to anything reasonably called success. And then people are going to think you're an overnight success. It's like they're going to forget the 10 years of sweat toll. So just keep at it. And that stayed with me, right? And I actually think 10 years is wrong. 10 years is US. Like,
it's like 20 years.
It's 20 years, actually, right? For the time we started, right? Because we started when there was nothing. Right. So for people now, it's a shorter time period, etc. But we started when there was nothing. So I fully get that.
What did it look like for you? Because a lot of founders, especially in the fintech space, they always think about the product, the distribution, but never really spend that much time thinking about the regulator, right? You've been somebody who seems to have established a really good relationship with CBN over time, right?
Yes.
What did that look like for you in the old days where you're like, these people might be disturbing me, they're shutting down my business, or they're not giving us licenses? I think you've had to wait like almost a year plus for a license before, right? Longer than that. So how has your relationship with the regulator, CBN, evolved over time? What advice would you have for founders on how to navigate those relationships with the regulator?
Yeah. One of the challenges the Nigerian government in general has is that we're really bad at PR. And I say that, and I say the central bank is also really bad at PR. And I'll be happy to say anything to the central bank.
Tell them to come on the podcast. We can talk to them too.
You should have the central bank governor. He's an amazing human being. And I say this because they get a bad rap. There is not a single regulation I can think of in the 16 years that I've been doing this business that has come out where the central bank did not seek opinion on. Doesn't mean they'll take your view, but they seek opinion. And I've seen multiple times their view being delayed and being changed by seeking that opinion. So, but when it comes out, they don't get the proper credit that they actually went through a proper process. Even in the craziest of times of policies that we've seen that were short, there was still opinion, right? So that's one. And so the first time I engaged the central bank was literally, I went to the website, saw a phone number, and I called. And within 3 transfers, I was talking to the right person. And then I met him a week later in Lagos. And at the time, he was special assistant to the deputy governor. And today he's the director of banking supervision, right? And it's just, so for me, even like watching his career as well has been amazing to see, right? Like he was an SA, now he's this director of banking, which is the biggest department. For those who don't know, it's the most influential department at the central bank. And I remember he was very open. He's like, oh, here's what we're thinking. He had led the drafting of the payments policy, the first payments policy. Here's what we're thinking. Here's the document. I'll be happy to take your feedback. Give him feedback. We applied. It took longer than I was comfortable with, and that was 3 months. So now, from what I know, I'm like, 3 months is nothing now, guy. But 3 months, I was already like sweating, like, where's this approval? All this stuff. And then we were able to navigate our way to meet the central bank governor at the time, Lamido Sanusi, who's probably one of the smartest human beings I've ever met. And he was like, Tayo, I've never heard of this idea before. This is amazing, right? And then he gave us an advice in front of his team that we've taken to heart, and it's my advice to other people in regulated businesses anywhere in the world, is like, you want to be close to the regulators and let them see you as a trusted advisor. So they're not as close to the technology evolvement, the evolution, etc. You need to help them understand it. And so we, really took that to heart, to keep doing that and to stay engaged with them. And then we formed an association. I led it for a while. Now Jay's leading it. And again, as the association, we're taking the view of everybody. So it can be a Paga view. It has to be everybody together. What's good for us as an industry, and then going to the regulator. And so I think what my biggest advice to people who choose to go to regulated businesses, I still say don't go into regulated businesses, but if you choose to go into a regulated business, then stay engaged with your regulator, right? Make sure they know you. Make sure it's not just when you need something you're calling, right? Just check in, right? I remember back in the day before COVID, I would just show up in Abuja, no agenda. I'll just go in and I'll sit with them, and we'll I'll work, take my call, they go to their meeting. Tyra, you're still here. I'm here, and we'll just and talk, right? And even if it's interesting actually, that I think back to some of those times, the people who were gisting and talking with were not the director level, right? Just people working in the office, but those people are now directors, right? And I think what I love about the Nigerian CBN especially is that they're very fair. Like, people are very fair. So they would listen to you. If you're, if you are wrong, they'll tell you you're wrong. Because we're friends doesn't mean I won't tell you you're wrong, right? And can debate, So it's been a great experience. And I think they get a bad rap, right? Yeah.
I remember reading, I think a report around agents and agencies or agents in Nigeria. And I think at the time they actually were quoting Paga. Like, I think Paga had said at about 10,000 or 21,000 agents at the time, right? And I believe OPay came into the market, and now you're hearing numbers about 100,000, 150,000 agents, whether it's between MoneyPoint or OPay. What assumptions did you have at the time that they came and basically you had to then reflip your thinking about the max limit of how many agents we could actually have in the country? Like, could you break it down, from Paga's perspective, and then when they came in and what it now looks like today?
Yeah, I think it's really one thing. And that is that when we set out, and even the regulatory framework, we set out that agents had a store. 3 walls and a roof is what we used to say, right? And I think and actually is one of the things I think we didn't do well at the time. Although you can argue, you can always go back and quarterback things, right? But you could argue that it's okay as it turned out, but ultimately, we did not see the individual person who didn't have 3 walls and a stall being an agent. We didn't see the regulator being okay with it. We didn't think it would work, and it did. And they did only one transaction, which was, I have a POS, I have cash, and I want to give you cash out. They didn't do anything else initially, right? Interestingly, now the central bank is now trying to stop that. So now the new policies is actually aimed at stopping that type of agent.
Yeah.
Right. But that, I think, was what helped a MoneyPoint and an OPay scale the agency side, is that we're not thinking about someone with a stall, just an individual, give them a point of sale device, and they run.
It's so interesting because I wonder, and this is just me quarterbacking, right? Like, in the US, I know a lot of fintech companies usually have to have an office, like with the whole 3-door type thing too, where it's like, look, we need to know where this mail is going to, right? Exactly, so I wonder, did that play a role in, even if it wasn't a specific regulation, where you're like, an agent just can't be a person walking down the street randomly with a POS.
Yeah. So if you wear what I'll call the veil of ignorance, and you say, what should the policy be, right? I can see very well why, from a regulatory point of view, you don't want it to be a random individual, right, doing that kind of business, because when there's fraud, where do you go? Right?
Who shit can you hold?
Who are you holding, right? And that's why at ATMs there's a camera, right? Is that we can see what's happened here, right? And so you could argue that it should never have been allowed in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, it also created employment for people. And it also digitized at a critical time. Because remember, it was around COVID, and then COVID came and then accelerated.
Yeah.
It was already happening a little bit, and then COVID came and accelerated. So again, you could quarterback it, but like, I'm not too surprised. The central bank now is like, okay, no more. Because what's happening is that the fraud that's actually happening that they're seeing, which it's funny, they don't talk about all these frauds very publicly for different reasons. But really what they've been seeing are people who break into accounts, then it quote unquote gets cashed out at an agent. And the agent's this individual, we can't find the individual anymore, right? So they want it to be a location that we know this business, right? And we can get them. Now, the back and forth with the industry has been not every business is registered as a formal business, and it's not against the law for an individual to do business. So even if you have a location and you're GPS coordinated, doesn't mean that you're a registered business. Now, again, the central bank has currently said, okay, individuals can also do this. But then CAC is also rightly saying to be a business in Nigeria, you need to at least have a business name. So even if you're an individual doing business, you need to register your name. And we've made it super easy to register your name. So I actually don't know how that piece is going to play out. I do think CAC is on the right side of the law, but the law needs to change. But CBN is CBN. So they're going to somehow let it be okay.
Paga celebrated its anniversary, I think almost like a couple of months ago.
Yeah, right? We celebrated 16 in April. Yep.
Okay.
Sweet 16.
Sweet 16. Yeah.
I think what I would love for you is to give the perspective of a founder who's, you know about this concept called default alive?
No, I don't actually.
So it's this idea that, and I think I learned about it on the All In podcast. This was during the COVID or the bear market, when the bear market started. And I think they were advising startups who had either underraised or overraised and just saying to them, get to default alive immediately, which is stop prioritizing growth and get into sustainable value metrics where it's like, revenue coming in, right? And they were basically saying your whole goal is to become default alive, which is don't die.
Got it.
Right? And I think that's something I would also apply to Paga, because you've said that there were years where you would even wait maybe 6 years for like policies to change, right? But in that whole time, you still have to be alive.
Sure.
When you think about Paga's inception till now, there have been so many startups that have been dead.
Sure.
Like we don't even want to like go down the whole list, but you're talking about big e-commerce startups like Conga, like there's a whole list of them. When you think back, and this is reflecting now as yourself as an entrepreneur, right? What level of respect do you give to yourself where you're like, look, man, you can say what you want, but I'm still here, right? Because there's a field of people who didn't come through this. And it doesn't mean that they didn't do their best, but that we have managed as a business to be default alive almost from 2010 to 2025, right? So what does that look like when you're going through the peaks and the valleys and you're like, man, I wake up tomorrow and Paga.com is still loading, right? Like it's like there's an office to go to, and I've gone through those seasons because it's for the founders who have to go through this concept of like, do what you have to do to survive the seasons, right? Don't die, because you never know when the game might change and then it switches in your favor. So what does that look like for you?
Wow. I don't think I've ever thought of it the way you framed it. And I certainly don't sit on any laurels about it, because I also think like, it's when like when I in the company, people were like, "Oh, why not a startup?" I'm like, where I started in my head, like, this thing is still failing. Like, like so it's just like, what are you talking about? We'll have to mitigate risk, all that kind of stuff, right? Like, and working our ass off, but like, but I don't sit thinking that it's all good, like we're just chill, because I always say my first job is keeping the lights on, right? Like, and that's like key, and making sure that we have the right capital, we're right capitalized, etc. But I guess the way I've thought about it is that the way we talk about it on our team is that we want to control our own destiny. Doesn't mean we don't raise capital, just like we want to control our own destiny. And so controlling our own destiny means that we've got to be really focused on results, and to get the results, we have to deliver quality to the customer, because it's what the customer pays for, right? And that means we have to develop better quality, and we're also in a competitive space. Anything we're doing, other people will now want to do, etc. Right? Like if we're doing it well, other people want to copy it. And so I think it's about, building the culture within the company of discipline on how we spend. I can bet, if you ask anybody in my company that we need to buy this microphone, right? They will look for 3-4 providers of the great quality microphones, and they will negotiate the heck out of it, right? That's just how the team is. And I think it's in the DNA of the team. They want a great quality microphone, but they're going to get the best price, right? I remember recently being in a meeting where I spoke out of turn in terms of a negotiation and the price. Like literally, and our head of marketing was on the call 3 floors down from me. Like literally in 5 minutes, she was in my office after the course. Like, what the heck did you just do? She's like, no way. Why did you even get it? She was on my case. Like, why did you even get involved? Like, I was going to negotiate it this way. I was like, oh, wow. So I was like, I'm so sorry. Let me just, and so she literally just like took it off, right? I just completely went, and completely had to go back and renegotiate. Right, that's what Tayo said is not correct. Don't think because he's the CEO. And I'm like, and so it's funny when I tell people come to me and I connect them to the team. I'm like, yeah, Bet's actually going direct. This is coming through me because once it comes through me, they're going to even have another eye again on this thing, right? Because don't think that I'm going to be the one to make the say on what goes. So I think it's building that into the team, building that culture into the team, because you can't control everything. You're not there when, there was a wonderful, I don't know if you guys caught yesterday, post from Daryl, and, I saw this post that went viral, and I sent it to a friend and she was like, this is great. And I'm like, yeah, I'm seeing it the way you're seeing it. Like, I didn't know about this. Like, it's not like I knew about it before either, right? Like, and so I think it's giving people autonomy, right? But being clear on what the goals are and like that we want to be sustainable, we want to control our own destiny, we want to manage how we spend money, and building that ingrained through the company. And I think it pulls everybody's muscles in a different way.
Actually, what is one uncomfortable truth about building in Nigeria that most people don't want to hear?
The earning power and ability to pay for consumers is much lower than it seems publicly. And I think maybe more and more people are getting comfortable with that idea. But I think generally speaking, that's something that, because people just look at, 200 million people, most highest GDP on the continent, there must be a massive consumer opportunity here. But I think that's a longer play than a now. So I think actually the earning power and free cash flow to be able to pay for quality is lower than people imagine.
And so if you were to start again, right, and let's say it was a consumer business, what segment of the market do you think there's opportunity because of that knowledge you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I were to start again, I would maybe have gotten to where we've gotten to now faster, which is, our target audience is the mid to upper end of the market. And, not to say that there's not a market on the mass market play, right? I think OPay is doing a good job of that. MTN's going to come in still and do a good job. I think they'll do a great job. I won't bet against them. Airtel will try, right? But GT's not going anywhere. Zenith is not, Zenith doesn't do big consumer. Access not going anywhere, right? So a lot of people are going to go after that mass market play. I think, and we are very focused on mid to upper end of the market, white collar workers. Not to say that we don't serve everybody else, but like our primary target focus is that. And so if I was to start again, I would have gotten there faster, right? Because if you think about how we started, and now we've had to change it in people's minds that Paga is for you, because they knew Paga as the agent business.
Yeah, that's how I see it. Yeah.
Right. And even I used to say back then, I would never go to a Paga agent. And people were like, but you're the one. I mean, as a customer, I would never use a Paga agent. It was not for me. Yeah. Right. So I think we'd have gotten there faster and would have reduced us having to show that Paga actually is for now this audience. I was talking to a very good friend of mine yesterday, and I really appreciated that he said this. He's now in California, and he said, back in the day when Paga started, I used it and tested it for you as my friend is doing this thing. I need to help him with it, not because it was for me. But now this Paga US launch, he's like, now it's for me. So I'm not only signing up because I actually need this product.
Yeah.
And I was like, I appreciated, the way Jimmy said it. Like that's the way he put it. Yeah.
And actually, I want to go personal because you are married to an entrepreneur,
Yes.
right? Everyone
I was
knows
going there
Afi.
too.
Yes.
Oh, no, I'll go on my side. You go on your side. And actually, she's someone I played football with for a long time,
flag
right?
football.
So someone I actually know.
Yeah.
So this is exciting for me. But I'm curious, how do you balance that? Like, I feel like typically, and this is like a global thing, right? Which is like, there's a 2-parent household. So either you are working, at some company that keeps everything going. You got insurance.
Yeah.
Everything's cool.
Yeah.
You could do the risk, right? But both of y'all are in the risk.
We're both in the risk, man.
So I'm curious, how do you guys balance? Because it feels like you guys were always kind of like that. So I'm curious, how do you deal with that?
Also, I want to add to that before
Sure.
you answer, so you can answer one time, because
Sure.
I'm curious too, because obviously we're also two entrepreneurs, right? So what was it like when you both first started and now when you guys are like 10, 15 years in the game, right? And you're like, we choose our battles differently.
Yeah.
We're in sync. Like, you prioritize, like, look, this is like priority A.
Yeah.
This is not a fire. Like, you know which fires are like, yo, we need to go put this out. This fire can blaze for 10 days. We'll get back to it. So what does it look like to be in that level of sync as well?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I have to think back. So look, first of all, it's very hard, as you both would know. And I think it's especially hard having two entrepreneurs if it happens to be that I'm curious because whether you work together, like it's very hard when the moments where things may not be as great as I would want them and it's not for her as well. That's the hardest, right? Because generally the support we give each other is to be a sounding board to the other person. Now, I started my company a few years before she did hers, but she already started when I met her. And I remember in the early days, I love problem solving. So, she would complain about something, and I'm trying to solve the problem. First of all, I've learned now that actually in that moment, she's not looking to solve the problem.
Yes,
she just wants me to listen.
You're just a rant, exactly.
So I've learned the hard way, but I learned. I remember once, and I took on running because of Afi. It's one of the ways that she influenced me. And then me and some friends decided we'll go running in different cities around the world. And so I remember one day we had this, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but I advised her on something about her business, and she was pissed off at me. She was like really mad at me, like, what is this? And I think that evening I flew to Prague, met up with my friends. We're going to run in the half marathon in Prague. And my friend Ayo, I then shared with him what happened. And Ayo was also an agric at the time, knows Afi, they share notes a lot. And after I explained everything to him, we're walking down the streets of Prague. He looked at me, he's like, Tayo, there was nothing wrong with what you said. It's just that you said it. I was like, what? He's like, yeah. He's like, if I told her exactly what you said, it'll be fine. But you cannot. I was like, wow, okay. And but that was the beginning of wisdom, and the beginning of also trying to figure out and being clear with each other, like, okay, what do you need from me right now around this, and I still have to pull myself back. Even yesterday evening, I walked downstairs and she said something, about that was going on with the business, and I quickly, and it had to relay with payments a little bit, but it wasn't like Paga, it was like something else payments, and I immediately was like, oh, I think I know why that's the case, I was like, I'm doing it again. You don't have to solve. She's just, this is happening. I don't have to solve the problem. But I think what at that moment, and go back to the IR story, around that time, I think what I then really started encouraging her is to have advisors who not people who were necessarily not in her business or investors in her business actually, but who just cared about her and her success. Right. And so she got a few people like that and who would just advise her on the business. And then that gave me a lot more comfort as well, that I didn't need to try to be as, then when I'm invited in, it becomes better. And then vice versa as well. But it's hard, right? Because you spend a lot of time in your business, and then you get when you want to talk about it again, right? And and the person has to hear the same thing over and over, right? Both ways. So learning to, okay, I have other outlets, right? But I actually struggled with this for a while. I remember talking to a few friends, and I have one set of friends who they never talk about their business at home, like as a rule.
I was telling her,
and I was until today I'm surprised.
They're like, most men I know don't talk about their business to their wives. It's like it's a Chinese wall. It's like, yo, you do your thing, I do my thing.
Yeah, and this particular couple I have in mind, they're both private equity investors. And then they told me a story of, because when I was asking them about this, right? And then they told me a story of a deal where they're both working on a deal. They both knew there was another party. And the guy was like, man, this other party is just like raising the price and doing all this stuff. Like, this is crazy. So he had to walk away from the deal. So he walked away from the deal. And then one day he comes to grab his wife for something. And on her computer was a presentation of that company. Then he was like, wait, are you doing that deal? She was like, yeah. She's like, you're the one. You're the one who was like raising the price and doing all this. And she was like, oh, you're the one on the other side. No idea. Same house.
Wow.
No clue. Different firms, right?
Yeah.
Like, just no clue. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like, but I was like kind of crazy. Like, she's like, yeah, I won the deal. Crazy. And so, but I don't know that. I mean, Anafi as well concluded that we couldn't do that. Like, I mean, it's just like, so I think what we can do is like not overdo it, right? Like, and be willing to like, I don't want to hear about Paga right now. Okay, I don't want to hear about real food right now. Like, it's like, let's chill. And I'm probably more guilty than about talking about Paga. But no, it's tough. It's tough. But I think there's a lot to learn from each other. So like that really, really helps. And then with the kids, I mean, I think it's really helpful that we have, great help at home, right? That also steps in to help with that. And then we, of course, chip in when we have to, etc. And I think it's created, the other thing I would say is that also having hobbies. So for example, her doing flag football, right, became, an outlet of like, okay, I can leave work aside, and that flag football, you guys became very serious.
It's intense.
Very intense.
Yeah.
I watched Ashley play a game. I said, this is serious.
Cult. There was a day I came downstairs and there were like 30 people in our living room. I was like, what is going on here? There's
Wait, was this years
meeting.
ago?
Yeah.
I feel like I was
there. Was
there.
some sort of like, I was like, what is this? And then now she's into ultimate frisbee, right? Like that's what she's doing now. She just came back from the Africa ultimate frisbee competition. I'm like, there's an Africa ultimate frisbee competition. Like, okay, and of course still into her running. And
I always see her on the bridge.
Amazing. Yeah, no. So she, I'm really proud of her. I mean, like she did 90 kilometers comrades in South Africa earlier this year, which is just, and did that like without little or no training. About a month after she crushed her personal best at the marathon in London, which was a real treat because we took the kids, to see her running. That was like such a big deal. And so she did that and then did 90 kilometers in comrades. Although she got a lot of shit she did 65 kilometers for Nigeria turning 65 as well. And people were like, how is it possible? You went from Lagos to Abeokuta. Like, it's not possible. And I'm like, guy, she did 90. 65. What 65 we're talking about, and the 65 was not even like racing the whole time. It was like, they're running and walking it, right? While the 90 was like, we were trying to race it, So anyways, so I think but it's really inspiring, like, how she is on these things.
What does it look like for snacks in the house? Because
real fruit.
Real fruit. It's
real
also
fruit.
snacks.
Yeah,
right? It's dry snacks. So it's like, you're not bringing Mr. Biggs.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah. From that perspective.
So I'm sure you love all the flavors at that point.
Yeah. So here's what's fascinating. we do not have real fruit at home.
Really?
Yeah. And it's because I have real fruit at work. She has it at work.
Okay.
And if we had it at home, the kids love it so much.
Yeah.
It would just like, it wouldn't even survive. Right. And so we both love it. And then what we do is it's a treat. So when we go shopping and the kids see it, and then they're like, okay, buy me real fruit, right? So we do that as a treat. And then whenever we have guests, we then go buy it, right? Because like they expect it. They expect that you have it in your house. They're like, no, we don't have it in our house, actually. But you should have it in yours. Have it in yours. And so we have to go buy it. So what are snacks like in the house? Let me tell you this. There are very little snacks in our house.
Okay.
Just this weekend, Afi was out with the kids and I was home alone and I was craving chocolate. So I called my neighbor. I said, are you home? She's like, no, I'm not home, but what's up? I'm like, I'm craving chocolate. So I want to see if you have chocolate. She's like, that's random. But actually I normally do have chocolate at home, but and we don't have nothing. Like, if you talk to my kids, it's like healthy.
Yes,
everything is healthy at home, right? So ice cream for my kids is this protein shake that Afi makes that I absolutely hate. But she loves this protein shakes, and the kids, now that's their ice cream. Although they've now caught on to proper ice cream.
Wait, where? Because it probably
so
not
we
her.
go to no. So we go to Ice Cream Factory. So now it's Daddy. Take us. So shh, don't tell me. Because Daddy, I would normally do like once a month. I would go get ice cream.
Yeah.
Right. And again, we're trying not to keep it in the house, because if I keep it in the house, then it becomes, so this is the other influence that she has on me, is like my eating and, and my, because on my own, I'm really bad.
Yeah.
I'm really bad. And
when I first met her,
she really helps me with that.
Yeah, when I first met her, she was vegan, and I'm like, I don't understand all this stuff.
No,
but now, nobody eats greens more than me.
Oh,
I'll tell you that right
Are you
now.
serious?
It's crazy.
Yeah, he's like, I'm
she hasn't
very
really
happy.
get me that far.
Yeah, I'm very, no, he's not vegan, but I'm happy he's definitely has shifted what he eats.
Yeah.
Like he eats mostly fish now.
Okay.
I've tried to reduce the chicken a little bit. He still eats it, but I try to reduce. Yeah. So I like that.
I mean, we have a balance,
It's
right?
balance.
Yeah,
It's
we have a
balance.
balance.
It's balance.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I wanted to know, last thing on this topic is there a Chinese wall in anything? Like, are there just certain like topics or things you like, that's your world that has nothing to do with me, that,
No, not really.
Okay.
No, not really. We talk about everything. And and then the places where that are particular strengths for me, right? Oh, sorry. Places are particular strength for me, for example, fundraising, that kind of stuff, like helping her go through her deal docs. Then I take special time around that, that stuff. And then one of the things that very clear, like for me, like a lot of solving of like where I'm thinking about doing something this way or that way, or people. Afi has such a keen mind on people.
One of the best.
Right. Amazing, right? Like, and so when I'm hiring senior folks, I pass it by her, right? Here's what the person is, even have them meet her, right? I mean, I had my well, mentioning the worst hire I've ever had in 16 years. She met him once and she was like, this is not gonna work. I was like, what? Like, all of us interviewed this guy, it's not gonna work. And it didn't. And she was like, I could have told you. I told you. I should have met this guy. So actually, my business coach, was like, maybe part of your interviews for senior folks, one of the last things is just maybe dinner with you and Afi, just for her to like feel out who this person is, because she has this sense about people. And she has been right. Like when I'm struggling with that. Recently, we're struggling with a people issue with one particular person. Describe it to her, and just very quickly, like, this is what you should do. And spot on.
I have a question around that, because there is different business models, right? But there are mental frameworks that she might have learned from, because I mean, she's dealing with like,
physical labor.
Physical labor. Yeah. Like this is when you talk about farm and fields and streets, she's really in there. So I wonder if it leads to mental frameworks where she's like, look, this person is not going to be there when the trenches really show up. So I'm letting you know right now. So I wonder if that plays a role too.
It's quite possible, right?
Yeah.
I think I mean, and I haven't really stopped to think about like where she built that muscle, but I think that's probably a big one, right? But I also think she's just a very high EQ person in general, right? Like, And so she picks up on things and cues that others may not, and that I may not pick up on right away.
You know, I love this because we also, even though you guys don't work together, but we also had, we interviewed Naira, and he works with his wife, right? And like, I feel like one of the most viral posts we had is that like, there are actually Nigerian men that are friends with their wives.
Yeah.
So I actually love hearing that like there's a friendship and like you guys can
100%.
talk about everything as well.
Yeah, I mean, until Arsenal stopped doing well. So then she left me on football, you know, because before we used to, you know, banter football. But now my son has taken
But you
on
guys are back up a little.
No, well, I'm Chelsea. I'm Chelsea.
Okay,
I'm Chelsea.
okay.
You know, I could never be Arsenal, right? But you know, but before she'll watch football because Arsenal was sort of there. Now they're, you know, like it went through a lot of drought. Actually, now they're a little bit back.
Yeah,
a little bit back. A little bit, but I'm happy that she almost tried to convert our daughter to Arsenal, but now she's solidly Chelsea.
It's good.
I think she's almost fully there. Well, yeah, but my son is 100% Chelsea. Yeah.
We created the Afropolitan Podcast because we wanted to make sure we tell the stories of those who came before us and those who are coming in front of us.
Our stories deserve to be documented and remembered.
And over here at Afropolitan, our drink of choice is Inveroche, which is a gin from South Africa because we believe African brands are global. So, Eche, what are you toasting to?
So our builders, our innovators, to show that Black brilliance exists worldwide.
I am toasting to African creativity. I feel like the world is just blossoming with beautiful African storytellers.
Here's to legacy.
And stories worth sharing.
So babes, I'm always talking to you about investing. How's your journey going so far?
It started because you've been on my head for the past 6 months about investing, and you'll be proud of me because I actually found an app I love. It's called RiseVest. And actually what I love about it is that you can start with $10 and it automates everything for you. So literally I just go into the app and literally it's investing for me every single day.
Yeah, because we know you're not going to be a trader anytime soon. But with RiseVest, you're going to be able to invest in US stocks, right? Fixed income, real estate, etc. Right? And so I'm happy you're finally on board.
And you know, the funny thing too is I always tell my girls that as women, we're not investing enough, we're not talking about it, and we're not having these conversations. So I shared it in all my group chats. So you can find RiseVest on the Apple and Google Play Store.
Okay, make sure to use code Afropolitan so that they know that we sent you. You know how every week we sit down with people who've done it, people who've built, people who've led movements, people who've created culture. What if you could do more than just listen to them? That is why we built Convo by Afropolitan. On Convo, you're able to book one-on-one video calls with in-demand experts from Africa and the diaspora. Go to convo.vip to get access to your next mentor, because sometimes one convo can change your entire path. So we're rapid fire, right? So our rapid fire segment is quick, fun, first thought that comes into your head, right? Profitability or growth?
Profitability.
Strategic acquisition or IPO?
Strategic acquisition.
Okay. Small team, big vision, or big team, small vision?
Small team, big vision.
Raise more capital now or bootstrap as long as possible?
Raise more capital now.
Okay. Lagos or Silicon Valley?
Silicon Valley.
Wait, why? You gotta explain yourself.
You said rapid.
Yeah, sometimes we gotta get into it.
No, for what?
You know the shake it. This is what I see. Okay. Nigeria or America, where do you feel more at home?
Oh, wow. This is a tough one. I feel very at home in both places. I prefer to live in America.
Okay.
I feel very at home in both places, but I prefer to live in America. And I think it's really, just more options of things to do, things working, things, I went to America when I was 16. So I think my formative years were there. Yeah. And so there's still, even though I've been here now been back for a long time, there's still thinking that just aligns. Like, I feel like I'm back home.
What's your best Nigerian food?
Oh, I would say it's pounded yam and egusi. I really love. I don't have it as often. So I think if you ask my kids, they'll say jollof rice and plantain, right? It's probably what I have more often. And then amala and bakery.
Okay. Lagos traffic or San Francisco house prices?
Oh, San Francisco house prices.
Okay, and so the last question we ask every guest on the Afropolitan Podcast is, who would you like to see in that chair, and whose story do you think needs to be told?
Oh, that's a really good one. I think there's someone called Chris Bradford who I would love to see in this chair, and we should get him physically here. But Chris Bradford is probably the smartest person I know, and was one of my best friends, and we lived together in business school. Top of our class, from Kalamazoo, Michigan, so white American, as you know, and the reason why I think he'll be great to be in this chair is because, he could do anything after business school and had offers upon offers, but chose to move his life to South Africa to focus on what I think is the number one problem for Africa, which is leadership. And saying, how do we, for Africa to be successful, we have to build the next generation of leaders. And he started what is called the African Leadership Academy.
Okay, with
Fred Swannigan.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people know Fred, but may not know Chris.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And Chris, I think just amazing human being, and big heart, big vision, and has built, ALA to where it is today, and now handed off to the next generation. He's on the board still, and now he is in North Carolina leading a foundation for University of North Carolina that focuses on, is actually the oldest scholarship program, the Morehead Cain scholars in the U.S. that, it gives a full ride to U.S. citizens, I think, to come to UNC. But earlier this year, he convinced them to try the program for people outside of the U.S. And so they came to Lagos, they went to Istanbul, and they went to New Delhi, I think it is, or Mumbai. And now for a 1-year program, they've taken, they interviewed folks from these 3 places, and they've taken a cohort to come and spend a year at University of North Carolina. And one of the students that came from Nigeria, I remember interviewing him, and he's never been on a plane. But I just talking to this kid, it was like amazing story of his life, and just like his vision and desire. And I was like, you'd be crazy not to take this kid, right? Give him the opportunity, right? So I think Chris is someone who has impacted the continent in a significant way, and the impact is multiplying through the lives of all of the kids that have gone through ALA. And I think it'd be a great person to have on this show for your audience to get to know someone else who's like, they may not have thought of before.
Okay. Yeah, I love that.
I have one more question before we wrap.
And he comes to Nigeria from time to time. So
okay, cool. We'll try and get him in. I just want you to walk us through the period of devaluation of the Naira and then the cash crisis.
Which time?
He said which time?
I saw 2016.
Well, you've been here. You've been around.
I moved back in that period.
You've been around.
So,
okay, let's talk about when it went to 1800.
Okay.
Right? That period, but also the period around when cash vamoosed from the Nigerian society.
Yeah.
What did that look like for Paga during that time? And how did you have to navigate from waking up, I think at that time it used to be maybe 460 to 1, and then it ballooned all the way to 1800. What shifts as a company did you have to make, pivot, and also even during the cashless policy as well?
Yeah. No, starting with the devaluation, right? I mean, the first big thing for us, and I think we started building that muscle from COVID, is that we went back truly to look at all our dollar spend and said, how do we reduce our dollar spend? And we negotiated everything, right? You probably know Aaron Levy of Box. Aaron's a great guy, but I had to negotiate our box price with Aaron. I was like, listen, if we don't get it to this price, we would, we need to leave, right? And we're probably the first box client in Nigeria, so we've been on box for a very long time. And he was gracious about it. We said, would you sign a 3-year contract? I said, yeah. But it's that kind of going line by line. Okay, how do we reduce this cost? How do we reduce that cost? And so that was from COVID period. And then when now this devaluation happened, part of, and thank God for my colleagues in finance that work with me on this stuff. But part of the wisdom was that we actually were using an exchange rate that was already quite conservative in our planning. Now, the devaluation ended up passing that, but that meant that the impact to us on a cash basis was not as bad from our planning, because we actually had planned a much lower
spread
rate. And that's hard because that means that you're like being conservative, right? Like on how you're looking at things. So I think from a cash basis on the business, then that didn't have too crazy an impact. But of course, it meant all our costs in dollar terms, because we're earning Naira, were going up, right? And I think that's, from a long-term perspective, I think the influence on the strategy is that, look, we also have to be earning in foreign currency, right? And increasing the share of our business that earns in foreign currency, right? And I think that's true of many businesses in thinking about that. So I think that's, on the devaluation side, the interesting thing about our business though is as long as there's commerce happening domestically, we're moving volumes, right? So today we process over $1 billion every month, right? And consistently has been growing very well. And that's across all the business lines are growing really nicely on that side. And that just shows you that, and again, if we didn't have the devaluation, then that would have been like, we'd be saying 4 billion or something, right? Some crazy number. But it does show you that the resilience of the business. I mean, for a very long time, the IMF team that comes to Nigeria annually will come and meet with me. And I remember like the third year, I was like, actually, guys, I always enjoy this conversation with you guys, talking to economists about what's going on. But why do you guys want to talk to us? It's like, well, your business is a marker of what's happening in the, in the economy, right? And so it gives us another perspective versus what the government is telling us. And I think that's true, right?
Yeah.
Are people still paying for DSTV? I can tell you trends that we're seeing, right? And so
wait, what are the current trends? I would love to know.
Oh, so if I take cable television, and I don't want to pick DSTV specifically, but all the cable television is going down in general.
Really?
Yeah. So people are moving online, right? So people are watching more online.
More YouTube.
More YouTube.
This is on YouTube.
Yeah. People are watching more YouTube. People are watching.
Crazy.
People are streaming channels, finding free streaming channels, right? I now watch my football on DAZN, right? And it's, maybe it flickers a little bit, but like it works fine. It's no worse flickering than when it's raining and my DSTV is like messing up, right? And yesterday, actually, I watched half the game on my home internet and then half the game on my MTN on my phone, but on the same big screen, it was fine, right? Like, and I think of the cost of DAZN for a year is the cost of, I would have paid for my cable 2 months.
DSTV. Oh, sorry, not DSTV, but
yeah.
What?
Actually, I do have a question though, because this is just random, but I always think about it. Are Nigerians traveling more or less? Because I feel like I'm on the plane and they keep talking about this economy, but I'm like, it's a full flight every single time.
Yeah. I don't know if they're traveling more because interestingly, I mean, I don't know the current numbers, but I remember talking to Bayo Wakanao, and maybe about a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago now, and he said the number of people who'd fly, unique travelers out of Nigeria is about 2 million.
2 million?
2 million.
Okay,
wow.
unique.
Which I thought was low. I was surprised.
Wait, every year?
Yeah.
Fly out or fly in?
I'm sorry. Yeah, Nigerians who fly out, not in.
Out, okay.
Sorry, out. Yeah.
That does.
Yeah, I
feel
thought it's just like, then he said they just fly multiple times, right? Like, and then I thought of myself and I'm like, okay, yeah, in a year I may travel, 4 or 5 times in a year, right? Like something like that. So, but he's like the number, so it may be that, some people are traveling more often. Like I actually feel like this year I've traveled a lot and I think about it and I'm like, what really like happened this year? Why, why was it this year that I've traveled
expanded into the US
so much?
too.
So I had work. So a couple things will work, but also been a couple personal things that have made me travel a lot more.
But based off of the trends you're seeing, what industry do you think is actually in danger because of this
in
economy?
danger. The thing about where the Naira and the freely trading of the Naira has gone to is that we just don't know what the future looks like, because it's the first time we're really having this in a very long time. So hard to say, but the places that are tough, that should be careful, are the places importing, the things that are importing. So what does that mean? And you see all the businesses that have left the country because they need to import a lot of raw material, but that also creates opportunity for people to take those places domestically and say, can I redo those things domestically? So it's going to be a double-sided thing where some may leave and some will stay. But I think anything importing, things that are exporting, starting to be good, right? Like, and, of course, there's the Trump tariffs to think about, which is annoying. But like, from a Nigeria perspective, annoying. I sort of get it from his perspective. Yeah. But, but I think what Nigeria ought to do is be there negotiating, like, and make sure that we're having the best possible deals. The other thing that hasn't actually hit hard yet, which we'll see more of, is the tax regime. We didn't get to talk about that, right? Yeah, the tax regime is going to be really interesting, because now Nigeria, I think, is taxing on global income and doesn't have a treaty with the US. So that's going to be interesting.
You said does it or does
not have a treaty with the US.
But so what does that mean? Break that down for us.
So if Nigeria doesn't have a treaty with the US, then you could be double taxed, because the US also taxes on global income.
Yeah, you will be double taxed. No, you can't.
Double taxed. So there is on the US side, there is a new law that is going through Congress that hasn't yet passed, but which Trump actually campaigned and pushed for, which is the US individuals, US taxpayers should be taxed on income earned in the US, not globally.
Which would be good.
Yeah, so then that could counteract this particular point. But which would be good, which is what's happened for corporations in the US. They're only taxed on US income, right? So, I mean, net, I think for me, it's like the people who are importing anything is a tough place to be right now.
You were finishing up the point about the cashless policy and how it affected Paga.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, look, on the cashless policy, like one of the big impacts was like this, that those mobile agents we're talking about, right? I mean, the number of point of sale devices that we thought we would sell in 1 year, we sold in like 2 months.
Wow.
Right? Like it was just like, boom, out the door, right? Because everybody just jumped on that opportunity. Now, unfortunately, the policy I thought was badly executed. Mm-hmm. And so by the end of, at some period, there's actually more cash in circulation than when they started the policy. But now it's now leveled out a bit more, and we've now gotten to, I think now we're about 80% cash. We used to be 90-something%. So there's still a long way to go, right? And there's still a lot of cash in the system. But I think that's one of the things I'm really excited about here, is that we're going to see more digitization. We're going to see tap to pay come out in Nigeria. Reduction of needing to do a transfer. You can just tap your card and go, which will be faster than typing a bank account number and all that kind of stuff. So I think we'll see more digitization. I don't know about this new ATM policy. I'm not exactly all with that, but I sort of get where they're going. Ultimately, they want to reduce those individuals. So you have to give away for people to get some cash. But I think we need to get to where Germany is today. Germany's about 50%. So for me, that's the target, is like, let's even get to 50%.
50% cash, 50% digital. Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. Tayo, thank you so much, man. This has been a masterclass.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you.
Pleasure. Really enjoyed this.
Yeah.